Hey guys, today I want to look at the Chrysler brand and what the future might hold. I get a lot of comments that kind of bash Chrysler, saying things like, what are they doing, why is their lineup so small, they need to bring back this car and that car, and other things like that. While visiting the latest Montreal and Toronto auto shows, it did hit me that Chrysler has almost no cars left. While Jeep, Dodge, and Ram brought out a full fleet of cars, Chrysler had just the Pacifica in Montreal, and in Toronto, they had the Pacifica along with the Chrysler 300. So it got me thinking about what's ahead for Chrysler and where they might go in the future, especially now that FCA is merging with PSA. I want to organize this video in the following layout. First, we'll look at the brief history of how Chrysler evolved, where Chrysler is now, what they are selling and how many, how the merger might affect the brand, and everything we know about their future plans. So let's get into it. Born almost 100 years ago in 1925, Chrysler has lived through it all. They were known as Chrysler Corporation from 1925 to 1998, often offering premium and higher-end vehicles. They would enter into a merger with Daimler Chrysler, where Daimler acquired the company in 1998, and that era would last until 2007, when Daimler sold 80.1% of Chrysler Group to an American private equity firm, Cerberus Capital Management LP. The Daimler Chrysler era wasn't too kind to Chrysler, and many felt that Daimler may have accelerated the ruin of the Chrysler brand due to too many decisions and actions that are just too long to describe in this video. However, during the 2000s, there were always 6 to 8 cars in the Chrysler lineup, like the 300, Aspen, Crossfire, Pacifica, Sebring, and more, and most of these sold pretty well. Unfortunately, on April 30th, 2009, Chrysler filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection to be able to operate as a going concern, while renegotiating their debt structure and other obligations. They would default on over $4 billion of secured debts and borrowed lots of money from the US federal government, $8 billion of financing at 21%. Fiat also comes into the equation as well. They had owned 20% of Chrysler in 2009, and that had grown to 58.5% by January 2012. Eventually, on January 21st of 2014, Fiat acquired the remaining 41.5% of Chrysler, and Fiat SPA and Chrysler Group LLC would merge to become Fiat Chrysler Automobiles, or FCA, on October 12, 2014. This cost Fiat $4.98 billion cash, plus an additional $5.5 billion pension liability, as Fiat had paid back US and Canadian government loans. So let's go back to the actual vehicles that Chrysler sells. By the mid-2010s, as part of FCA, the Chrysler lineup had shrunk down to just 3 models, the 200 and 300 sedans, and the Town & Country minivan. Looking at today's lineup, if you visit Chrysler.com, they will show you 4 vehicles if you press on models. However, they are just trying to appear bigger than they are. The 300 is the only remaining car, while the Pacifica is their only other vehicle. That hybrid is still a Pacifica model, while the Voyager is a bit of a marketing scheme, where they are keeping the old Pacifica look when the refreshed Pacifica comes out in 2021, and they're just calling that base Pacifica a Voyager. So to me, that's also still a Pacifica, meaning that Chrysler just has the 300 sedan and the Pacifica minivan in their small lineup today. The brand has been called the family-friendly people mover brand, as described by former CEO Sergio Marchionne, but both the sedan and minivan are shrinking segments. Now let's take a deeper look at the sales on the various Chrysler models. Overall in 2019, they sold just 126,918 cars across the whole brand, which was a 23% drop. This is the worst sales total in decades, and apart from 2018, these are the worst sales years since the recession in 2009, where Chrysler sold 177,000 cars and declared bankruptcy. So this is becoming a pretty dire situation for Chrysler, and they are only able to remain profitable due to the older platforms they are using, as they are cash cows, which we'll talk about a bit later. The Chrysler 300 is definitely shrinking, dropping down into the 40,000s for 2018, and then it took another drop by 37.3% down to 29,000 in 2019. The longevity of this car is far from assured, and there have been rumors about the car being cancelled for several years now. The large car market also dropped down to just 4.9% of the industry in 2010, but by 2019 it had fallen even further to only 1.3%. It's still offered for 2020, but I have been hearing that dealerships are only getting a couple of them, if any, since the sales are expected to keep dropping. There have been virtually 0 changes since the 2015 model year, and the platform is getting outdated and less exciting by the day. So we'll have to wait and see what happens to the 300, but it is still here for the time being. Chrysler currently offers a 5-model lineup: Touring, Touring L, S, Limited, and C, with either the 3.6-liter V6 with between 292 to 300 horsepower, or the 5.7-liter V8 Hemi with 363 horsepower and 394 pound-feet of torque. all-wheel drive is available on the V6 only, and every model has an 8-speed automatic. The prices begin around $29,000 and rise up to over $42,000. As for the Pacifica sales, they are better, but they still dropped 17.4% from $118,000 in 2018 to just under $98,000 in 2019. Chrysler started the US minivan market in 1983 by launching the Dodge Caravan and the Plymouth Voyager, and the minivan segment was booming by 2005, selling over 1.2 million vehicles. But by 2019, again, it's down to just 400,000 vehicles, which is under 3% of the auto industry market share. So this is another declining segment, but Chrysler is still pushing their Pacifica. They have refreshed the car for 2021, so that'll be coming out soon with a sporty and aggressive look, more premium and luxurious interior, tons of new technology, and all-wheel drive for the first time on a Chrysler minivan since 2004. There will be the 3.6-liter V6 with 287 horsepower as the gas engine, and that's with a 9-speed automatic, and the hybrid model will carry over as well. For 2021, that gets a dual-motor E-Flight electrically variable transmission, or called an EVT, and that will get paired with a modified version of the 3.6 gas engine, giving 260 horsepower in total. That gives it an all-electric range of 30 miles, a total range of over 500 miles, and overall can get up to 80 miles per gallon in electric-only mode. Pricing is unknown for 2021, but the 2020 had started at $33,000 and rose up to almost $50,000, while the hybrid had similar pricing. As I mentioned, the Chrysler Voyager nameplate is returning for the 2020 models, but that's just a more affordable Pacifica. It will carry the old design over once the new 2021 Pacificas are released. It has the same engine, transmission, and body, but it's just more bare bones with less premium features. There will be an entry-level model replacing the Pacifica L, costing $27,000, and an LX that costs $30,000. The merger between FCA and Groupe PSA will create 13 brands between the combined entity. Those 13 brands include FCA's Jeep, Ram, Chrysler, Dodge, Fiat, Alfa Romeo, Maserati, and Lancia, while PSA has Peugeot, Citroën, DS Automobiles, Opel, and Vauxhall. Many people keep asking, when will FCA get rid of Chrysler, or will they get rid of Chrysler in the upcoming few years? It doesn't look that way based on some comments from Carlos Tavares. He's slated to become the CEO of the merged entity, and he's the current PSA CEO. So he said some things that could point to most of those 13 brands sticking around. He has called himself a brand addict, and recognized that each brand has their own heritage, history, and emotion. You can see a quote on screen from December of 2019, where he talked about the biggest intangible asset of a car company being the brand portfolio. He also wants to keep the brands in their country of origin, as for the headquarters. And he also said that, quote, if we're differentiated enough in the brand, it will be very synergistic. We want to maximize our brand positionings within the group portfolio. Every brand has its own chance, end quote. So it looks like the PSA merger could be a good thing for the Chrysler brand specifically. Tavares has also been praised for his remarkable job of turning around the Opel and Vauxhall brands. They were money-losing brands from GM when PSA bought them in 2017, and they had not been profitable for 20 years, losing GM over $20 billion. Within just 6 months in 2018, Opel had an operating profit of €502 million under the guidance of Tavares, a total reversal of fortunes. PSA also didn't change the brands a whole lot, allowing them to retain their original qualities and brand identity. So PSA looks like they'd be a perfect partner in this case, as they're not looking to immediately kill off the smaller brands, or the brands that aren't doing as well, like Chrysler, and Tavares certainly wants to keep the brand identity strong for each one in the merger. With respect to profitability, industry expert and Autoline host John McElroy spoke, saying, quote, Chrysler is the golden goose within FCA. It makes 100% of the profits. It will also be the most profitable part of PSA FCA, and PSA will not want to screw that up. The merger could actually help the Chrysler brand, which is down to only 2 vehicles. So to explain that a bit, golden goose is just another word for cash cows, vehicles that are old and have their tooling and platforms paid off, but they still sell well, essentially creating pure profits with little expense for the company. So that includes both the Pacifica and especially the 300. With respect to Chrysler, Carla Bailo, who is the president and CEO of the Center for Automotive Research in Ann Arbor, sees this merger as a positive thing, especially because the other brands don't overlap outside of Europe with any of the North American brands. She has also said, quote, this partner is probably one of the better ones they could have chosen, and that Tavares does value keeping the brand identity strong and not merging into a more vanilla flavor, end quote. So that's a bit of info on the merger with respect to Chrysler. Now let's look at the future plans. I do want to emphasize that the future plans do contain some speculation, of course, as well as some research. First, I want to do a quick summary of the future plans of the existing models and what's going to happen to them. As we went over, the 300 has had declining sales and no updates for some time. Some automotive experts forecast the 300 to be discontinued within a year, but I'd take that information with a grain of salt because we don't really know. We do know that according to Jeff Schuster, who is the president of Global Vehicle Forecasting at LMC Automotive Forecasting, that cutting the 300 is, quote, something Chrysler has been considering. They can't get enough volume out of their large car program. Part of it comes down to demand. There's interest in sporty vehicles like the Challenger and Charger that have done well, but the volume still isn't strong. It's shifted to the SUVs and away from large cars, end quote. So the 300's future does look pretty bleak. Pacifica future looks much stronger. Fiat Chrysler has a house of brands philosophy where each brand is positioned to fill a different demand in the market. Tim Kuniskis, who is the head of passenger cars for FCA North America, has talked about the minivan, saying that from a company standpoint there are only 4 players. He says it's a good place to be, and he says that with minivans you're just competing on innovation and having the best product, because there's so few competitors. So the Pacifica is not going anywhere, especially since the Dodge Grand Caravan is getting cancelled in 2020. That leaves the Pacifica and Voyager as the only FCA minivans, and last year Chrysler and Dodge dominated, selling 55% of all the minivans, totaling over 220,000 units. The Pacifica is also the only minivan available as a plug-in hybrid, and it's the platform used for some robo-taxi services, such as Waymo LLC in Phoenix and AutoX in China. I do like the idea of the spin-off Voyager, which could get more buyers into a minivan at a lower price point. The Pacifica also outsold a bunch of vehicles in 2019, including the Durango, Challenger, Charger, and Jeep Renegade. But it may not seem that way, because minivans are just not as exciting as the beautiful and powerful muscle cars, which are found in the news headlines and all over YouTube. Mopar Insiders has reported that there will be up to 5 Chrysler vehicles by 2023, including the Pacifica and not including the likely discontinued 300. Former CEO Sergio Marchionne had said that the Chrysler is going to be a people mover brand, as we talked about, so that's the goal here, meaning lots of crossovers and minivans in their lineup. The only vehicle we really know about other than the Pacifica that would be in the works would be a mid-size Chrysler crossover to replace the Dodge Journey. This makes sense as Dodge focuses more on performance instead. It's likely that this crossover would be based on the Jeep Grand Commander, so this is currently a model in China that offers either 5 or 7 seats and all-wheel drive. It has a 2-liter GME T4 Hurricane gas engine with a 9-speed automatic transmission. There have been reports suggesting that the Grand Commander could come to the North American market as a Chrysler because that Jeep is just not suitable for off-road use. It doesn't offer a Trailhawk model, and it's more of an urban or city crossover. So the Grand Commander definitely wouldn't fit the North American brand identity of Jeep, but instead, it would be redesigned for North America, getting its own styling and likely a plug-in hybrid version as well. The reports say that it would be built at the Belvidere assembly plant in Illinois beside the Jeep Cherokee and could come to the market as soon as 2021. Now looking ahead to other potential plans, in 2016 Carlos Tavares had established a 10-year goal of reintroducing Peugeot and Citroën to the US market, so the merger could open up some more opportunities for Chrysler in this regard. It definitely would make a lot of sense for PSA to bring over their cars and rebrand them as Chryslers. To further explain, John McElroy, the industry expert and the host of Autoline, said, quote, I imagine Peugeot would like to export some of its vehicles to the US and brand them as Chryslers. While Carlos Tavares wanted to relaunch the brand in the US, why do it now when he would compete against a part of his own company? And why spend hundreds of millions in advertising to try to establish a brand name that Americans can't pronounce? Rebranding Peugeot as Chryslers could help them both. End quote. And I definitely have trouble pronouncing it, as he said. But that's the best possible way of saying it, and McElroy covered it nicely. It totally makes sense to keep that Chrysler brand around, but to infuse some new to North America Peugeots in there. The ones that fit the people-moving brand positioning that Chrysler is going for, like smaller CUVs and more electric and hybrid vehicles. So it looks like Chrysler will live on and have a more fuller-looking lineup by 2023, which includes the Pacifica, but probably not the 300. The merger is likely great news for Chrysler, and Carlos Tavares seems to have a good attitude regarding keeping all of the merged entities' brands, but of course there is always uncertainty, unpredictable circumstances, and significant challenges with something like this, and it may not work out in Chrysler's favor, similar to how Daimler Chrysler was seen as a negative for the brand. I'll leave you guys with a quote from 61-year-old Frank B. Rhodes Jr., who is the great-grandson of Walter P. Chrysler. Although he is not affiliated with Chrysler, he does want his great-grandfather's legacy to continue, and he currently drives a green metallic 2018 Chrysler 300. He said, quote, "It deserves to survive. Chrysler has done a lot for this country for almost 100 years. It needs to be preserved. Its heritage, its pride, it's part of Americana. We're seeing more and more of Americana go away. It's a shame." End quote. So that's the end of this video, guys. What do you make of all the information? Do you think Chrysler will last for a while and turn things around, or are they entering their final days? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I know it's a ton of information, but hopefully you were able to follow along. I tried to organize things as best as I could. As always, thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe for more Mopar content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.